Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm really pleased to have been invited to participate in this program and to give this presentation. I was just listening into the previous speaker and giving a very personal story about how he'd built his business, and that's wonderful. I guess my talk is going to be a bit more of on a strategic level, and it's all about innovation, the title being innovation and realizing the potential of innovation. Everybody talks about the importance of innovation, but I guess we need to think about what we really mean by the term and how we realize the potential of innovation in our businesses. And in this talk, we're going to look at how we can harness the value of innovation and avoid some of the common pitfalls around the subject and build innovation into our strategies and plans. Firstly, a little bit about me. You may have read some of this on the information that was sent out, but my early career was as an electronics engineer, working on advanced military communications, later in telecommunications. And I've worked throughout the project lifecycle in design and engineering and some leadership roles, R&D, product development, manufacturing, and so on. I've looked after teams at various UK locations and overseas, and some facilities management in the R&D space. Later on, I worked for a large local authority, establishing programs that were about supporting startup businesses and growth businesses, supporting innovation and export development, as well as working on some commercialization projects in that context. And the last couple of years, I've been working, providing consultancy and leadership coaching to SMEs in a variety of sectors. And so it's sort of in that guise that I'm here talking today. So going back to the subject then, there's much that can be said about innovation. And wherever you look in discussions about business, everybody talks about it. Everybody says how important it is, whether it's innovate to grow or whether it's innovate to change or innovate to survive and so on. But I think it's quite important that we understand what we really mean by the term, and how we realize its potential in our businesses. So in this talk, I'm going to try and answer that question: what is innovation? What are some of the obstacles to innovation and some solutions to that? Strategies that you can use within your own businesses, and then a little bit at the end talking about the impact of the pandemic and the opportunities that presents. So firstly, when we think about innovation, what do we mean? We can look back over history and identify things which have had a major impact on businesses, on economies, and on society. And the Industrial Revolution, going back that far, saw the introduction of automation that let things happen that had previously relied on lots of people doing repetitive work and manual processes, enabling those to be done repeatedly and accurately and at a scale that had never been envisaged before. But throughout history, more recent history, specific innovations have happened, such as the electric light bulb illustration on the screen of Edison, changed the way that we could use our time throughout all hours of the day or night, replacing existing solutions with a cleaner and safer and more convenient alternatives. Technologies for communicating, such as the telegraph, the telephone, wireless, and much later optical communications, and of course the internet, all have the effect of shrinking the world and bringing people together in different ways that could never have been imagined previously. Some innovations address problems for which reasonably effective solutions already exist, but they're simply made better or more effective or cheaper. So I didn't put a picture there, but the Dyson vacuum cleaner would be an example of that, or practical battery-powered transport. Other innovations have allowed advances in global transport or medical technologies. But these big ticket items have always been supported by a whole host of smaller innovations, which when you put them together in the right way, enable the big things to happen. Some innovation is the domain of small soul inventors, if you like, typified by the man or the woman in the shed imagery. But more usually in the modern world, we find that innovation is happening in more formal settings. For example, in the universities where innovations can spin out into industry, most large companies, especially multinationals, have their own R&D facilities. Sometimes the size and the structures of these can be an obstacle to the speed and the agility that's needed to apply innovations to the real world quickly and in a timely fashion. But of course, entrepreneurs with innovative ideas can quickly establish new and successful startups with the potential to drive economic expansion and high value employment. And I suppose that's where some of this talk is aimed at, the smaller end of that. So before we move it forward, I think it's helpful to have a definition of what we mean by innovation. And there are many definitions out there. I found this one to be very helpful. And as we go through the rest of the presentation, I hope you'll see why. So innovation, my definition, is the successful commercial exploitation of new ideas. Now, of course, some ideas aren't really new. Some are new, but they're not successful for various reasons. Some ideas are successful in that they work as they're supposed to, but they're not commercially successful. And we'll come back to the new ideas bit later, but I want to first explore the matter of successful commercial exploitation. I've talked to a lot of people who have had a great new idea for a product or a service, and they think they can make that into a successful business. And they often say, I've got this great idea and all I need is the money to develop my idea. But so often I find that they don't think it through. They haven't really thought it through. And the possibility is that they're likely to end up spending a lot of money developing the idea into a product or service with a kind of hope that the idea will generate enough business. This was reinforced by a survey that was done by the Institute of Engineering and Technology a couple of years ago, the IET. And from the results of their survey, they coined the term Inventor's syndrome. And I hope you can see the picture on the screen now. That is their picture that illustrates Inventor syndrome in terms of some of the obstacles to successful innovation. And remember, in the definition we talked about earlier, successful means successful commercial exploitation. It's not all about the science. There's no shortage of ideas, but Inventor syndrome, I suppose, is a belief that when we explore a technology and we develop it and we perfect it, it will somehow automatically find a market and become a commercial success. Sometimes people would call that the build it and we will come, build it and they will come approach. The danger is that as an inventor, one can come so fixated on bringing the idea to life that there's a disconnect with the commercial reality. Now, generating a good idea and developing a proof of concept and successfully taking it to market requires not just the engineering or the scientific expertise, but also financial and business and marketing acumen. Another critical factor is getting the innovation to market at the right time, as timing is often one of the biggest parameters of success or failure. So the picture here summarizes this as the main factors that can impede successful innovation: lack of commercial value and insufficient understanding of the market, and then at the same time spending too long in development, maybe, with the danger of over-engineered solutions. So to summarize this little section, I'm saying here that an innovative idea is not in itself a guarantee of a successful business. Success is not just about having the bright idea. Ideas need to be commercialized. And we've defined innovation as successful exploitation of new ideas, and new businesses and also established businesses with ambitions to grow will often have lots of ideas, but sometimes they're not successful because they focus on the idea, the invention, the technology, its newness, its uniqueness, and not on the market or the customer. And I often find myself getting businesses to answer this question: will my innovation lead to a solution to a problem that someone has, and are they willing to pay for it, and will that be at a price that makes sense? To be successful, we need to be able to articulate how our idea will solve the problems or add value to the businesses of a particular set of customers. and to be able to present them with compelling reasons why our particular solution is best. So in this next little section, I'd like to start to get practical really, and offer a simple framework that I've used to help businesses to address these challenges in what I call the innovation value proposition. The idea is that the result of this exercise will fit on a single page or maybe a small number of slides. It's not meant to be shared with customers. It's rather a tool for internal use, a step towards developing a product strategy or a marketing strategy, or maybe to present to investors. And we've used this successfully to support a number of small businesses who are looking at developing their product strategies. I've also used it in large technology organizations to help make decisions about R&D investments, and also interestingly in local government context where the discussion is about commercialization or transformation, but it's all about innovation. So the model has 3 questions which I would suggest it's worth asking whenever you're about to embark on a new venture or looking at a new innovation in a business. The first is, what's the nature of the business problem you're attempting to solve, and is it real? So many inventions they're an invention looking for a solution. Secondly, which potential customers have this problem, and are there enough of them to make a viable business? And then thirdly, in a competitive environment, what's the unique advantage of your solution to offer these customers? And so I kind of summarize this a bit colloquially by saying this is the internal value proposition is based on 3 questions. So what? Who cares? And why you? Why should they buy from me? To answer this, we need to be able to articulate things like what are the key features that the innovation will enable? What's the problem that the innovation is designed to address? And what are the business benefits for the customer? Under who cares, it's about being able to identify which customers have the particular problem that we want to address. And can we provide it at a cost that works for them and is profitable to us? Question 3 is about the competitive advantages, the strengths, the features, the differences. Is it about price? Is it about flexibility? Is it about service, location, the way you do business? But how you stand out from the competition. The challenge is to pull together all this into either a single page of short statements or a small number of slides. And I'd suggest that keeping it focused and concise is good. Once you've written it down, test it with people. Test it with people that you trust. Iterate it and improve it. Use the value proposition. Maybe you need to sell your concept to people who are more senior in the company, a basis for an investment pitch, or as a basis for a product development plan or marketing strategy later on. And of course, once it's done, it needs to be revisited to be a guide to what you're doing. So I hope that sounds like a practical thing that businesses can do and use in order to articulate the value of a proposed innovation. It's also worth thinking about what success looks like. Sometimes when we're investing heavily in an innovation, we can fall into the trap that thinking that success is proving that it works, or success is the launch of the new product, or success is achieving the first sale, but actually, or maybe even generating enough sales to break even. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the graph on the screen at the moment, going down that investment curve, first of all, incurring cost to get to the stage where the product is launched and then hopefully breaks even. But of course, going back to our definition of innovation, real success is only achieved when the commercial objectives have been achieved, when the required return on investment has been achieved, especially when the innovation has been financed by investors who will have their own payback expectation. So I wanted to make that point, that the commercial exploitation of new ideas doesn't only involve paying back what you've invested, but actually achieving your business goals as well. But moving this on now, I'd like to discuss the question of what makes an innovative business successful. For a period, I worked at Essex County Council in the economic growth and economic development arena, helping businesses to move forward and to grow. And we commissioned some research from Anglia Ruskin University. We called it our Innovation 50 program, and it was aimed at identifying the top 50 or so, we weren't wedded to the number, most successfully innovative businesses in the county. So quite a lot of research went into it, and also to understanding what sets them apart. And here's what we found. There were a number of themes that emerged, which were very clearly about having the right leadership, entrepreneurial leaders, while focused on a core or a set of purposes and values, but entrepreneurial, willing to experiment, willing to take risks. Customer orientation was important, and I hope that's come through some of the comments I've made earlier. Customer orientation, even though they're all about innovation, the choices of where to invest were driven by a focus on what problem the customer was trying to address. Innovation is obviously at the core of successful growth in this context, not only in terms of innovative products and services, but also innovations in how the work is done. New approaches to organizing things, to processes and procedures, and maybe from partnering. And of course, underpinned by a culture that encourages openness and freedom to experiment and having a positive approach to change. So that was what we found through the partnership that we did with Anglia Ruskin to look at what the characteristics of some successful companies were. Going back briefly to the IET survey that I mentioned earlier, part of their survey was to ask small and medium-sized businesses what their biggest challenges to innovation were, and as well as the things you'd expect, like access to finance and how to get the right skills around the problem and so on. One of the things that came out with almost 40% of the responses citing as a challenge was actually justifying the funds or the time that were invested in their innovation. So in the next section, I'd like to briefly cover some practical approaches to building innovation strategies into your business. One of the things I sometimes get clients to do when they're thinking about growth and application of innovation is to do, it sounds a bit formal, but it's just a simple exercise really, to do a product age audit. What percentage of sales come from products that are older than, say, 2 years? If a large proportion of sales are coming from products which are older than a couple of years, then putting that in the context of the pace of change of the market and the lead time for developing new products, that can tell us how urgently we might need to act to address future shortfalls in revenues. So a very simple thing, we're asking yourself what proportion of revenue comes from products which are older than the life cycle for developing new products. Quite an interesting question. Another tool that we often use is to consider where growth is most likely to come from. I hope you can see the slide on the right-hand side. I've written down some of the drivers for innovation and growth. Some of it is ambition, changes in the market, competitive threat, emerging technologies, all sorts of things that drive the need to make changes in the business. And while that matrix is perhaps a little simplistic, it makes the point that standing still and continuing to rely on selling products that you already have to existing markets is safe, but it's not really sustainable. Innovating with new markets that keep up with the market trends and customer demands is one way to grow. But equally valid is market innovation, looking for new markets for your existing products or evolutions of the existing products. That can include new channels to market. Look at the recent boom in online trading. And consider that, I don't know if this figure is bang up to date, but considering that only about 7% of the businesses in Essex are involved in exporting, which obviously is more challenging perhaps in the context of Brexit, but not an avenue that should be ignored. So where's the growth going to come from? Exploring new markets or bringing new products to markets? Or maybe both, more exciting, but perhaps more risky. This slide's probably a bit busy, but if you want to look up a copy of it later on, do feel free. It's about appetite for risk. Depending on where you are in your business growth journey, you might have the appetite for a lot of risk, or you might be a bit more risk averse. But that's all okay. Innovations can be applied in an incremental way, small improvements, easy wins, optimization, refinement, efficiencies, things like that. Evolutionary innovation, modest growth and expansion of new products based on existing capabilities and so on. But transformational innovation is obviously the biggest potential payoff, but also the biggest risk. You know, if you've got ideas and innovations which are going to involve major new ventures or adopting of new technologies or significant market disruption that you're looking to achieve. Each of these has their own risks and benefits, so it's important to consider which of these or a combination of them are going to underpin your strategy and which you've got an appetite for. So I think we've established that innovation is about new ideas, and we've got ways of generating lots of ideas. And there's a well-known quote from Mr. Pauling there. If you want to come up with a few good ideas or even one great one, then you have to generate a lot of ideas. And we've talked about having the right attitude to risk and failure. You know, James Dyson did a lot of experimentation before he came up with his new product. Lots of innovations that added up to that success. But the question really is, where are these ideas going to come from? What will power your business to bring forward new innovations? I've worked with organizations to form what we might call an innovation task force. Now, obviously, depending on your the size of your business, the task force might consist of everybody. But if you're in a bigger business, you might want to choose who you might want to pull together into a task force. It's quite simple conceptually, but it's often not something that people would necessarily invent for themselves. But pulling together for a task force from some technical people, customer-facing people, operations people, admin people, subject matter experts, even perhaps your most recent recruit. Doesn't matter what their job is, but bring them into the group. But asking a group like that the right questions, we'll talk about that on the next slide actually, and giving them the space and the time in order to explore what innovative possibilities are there, will then give food for thought. So assigning a group of people, giving them the space and the time to explore, and then of the ideas that seem to have promise, and don't forget the original definition, not just about new ideas, but new ideas that can be successfully commercialized. Some of those things can then be moved on to proof of concept, maybe prototypes, or maybe adopting into mainstream. And my suggestion is that this innovation task force is an ongoing conversation. I don't know whether it's a couple of hours every couple of weeks, or whether it's less frequently, or whatever. You can decide that for yourself. You maybe even consider external facilitation of the process. But the point is, it's about bringing forward ideas from a group of people. One individual in the organization doesn't necessarily need to be the fount of all knowledge. Asking the right questions is important. It's questions like, how can we reduce our product cost by 10%? Gives limited scope for innovation, really. A question like, what problems do we need to solve to create a customer solution that is a lot cheaper than our current offer, might be a better question. And there's some more ideas on the slide there. So what about the future? As we bring this to a close, I feel that we can't finish without acknowledging the impact of innovation on the caused by the current pandemic. And there's no doubt that unusual situations focus people's minds on the specific problems that businesses and society has as a whole. But businesses that will continue to be successful will be those who understand the shifts that are taking place and then correctly anticipate which shifts are permanent and which will die away. So an example, in working from home, pre-pandemic, some people worked from home, others didn't. During the pandemic, lots of people work from home. What's going to happen after the pandemic? What's going to happen in terms of business travel, which has taken a nosedive, but we've started to use video tools and introduce cost savings through not having to travel. But where will that end up in the future? More applications of electronic solutions to things. Where's shopping online going to take us? Where's online education going to take us? It's grown during the pandemic, but will all that go back to normal, and so on? Lots of opportunities there to think about the trends and think about which ones are going to stick and which ones are going to end up with something in between. Workplace preferences. There was a survey that was done recently that asked about people's preferences for where they would like to work. And the first slide, when pre-pandemic, about a third of the workers that were consulted would prefer more flexibility, but in the main, people were comfortable. Post-pandemic, and I think this update to the survey was done in January, doubled the amount of people who would prefer more flexibility. So as we exit the pandemic, businesses, I'd suggest, need to look at accelerating their capability and their processes around the right way to do hybrid work, especially as more people come back to the physical workplace. So bringing this to a conclusion, I think in this short talk, we've been able to look at the practical definition of innovation, focusing on the important success factors, which is about commercial exploitation. We've talked about what was called Inventor syndrome, how to address real problems, and how to avoid Inventor syndrome, making sure we address real problems. I've shared a few tools which you might find useful, such as the value proposition, the product age audit, and the appetite for risk matrix. And the challenge I suggested was forming an innovation task force in your organization to generate and explore a range of ideas that you'll need in order to find the new ones. And then finally, we looked at very briefly at the impact of the pandemic and some of the opportunities that that crisis has brought. So I think we're out of time, but that's okay, because I hope you found that this was helpful. If you've got any questions, my contact details are here. Find them anyway. And of course, if you'd like to explore any of this in more detail and look at how we might be able to help with practical implementation, then do reach out and we'll have a conversation. So that's me done. Thank you for listening.